Hello, Callum, mate. How you doing?
Hi, boss. How are you?
Yes, it's nice to speak to you. I've been following your career for a while now, so it's finally nice to get the chance to talk to you. How have things been recently, you right?
Yeah, I'm just cool. Yeah, I just got back from Portugal there yesterday, so I'm a bit tired, but I'm not too bad.
Oh yeah, was it a heavy one out there with your mate? So
Yeah, we were out there for a week and could have went home after the first day, to be honest. But a week, was alright. Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
awesome. Well, yeah, again, it's great to speak to you because I sort of came across you during COVID times. Funny enough, on TikTok, really, I probably have maybe a lot of people sort of saw you during that period because you sort of blew up as this, unknown Irish fighter who had came over to LA and somehow was training with, all the greats. So how has the sort of, last 2 years been? Because I'm guessing the sort of popularity is something that you expected, but it's come pretty fast and pretty young, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was even when I was in Portugal. There was so many people, man, coming up to me asking for pictures. There was, and I was thinking to myself, like, how are these people even after seeing me? And it's just all off the internet, Instagram, or like you said, TikTok, or whatever. The amount of people that are after seeing me, it's crazy. We were in the supermarket there one day in Portugal, and all these Portuguese boys came up to me, even like, "Oh, you're the boxer," or even bouncers in the nightclubs were giving me free drinks because they knew who I was. And it's crazy, like the amount of people that I'm after reaching. I didn't even realize it myself.
Mm, mm. And speaking of that, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think obviously a big part of it is, not many boxers are sort of boosted by the UFC this young. So with this whole sort of relationship you got with the UFC, how did this come around? I know it's in the last year and a half or so. Maybe it's a lot of people were sort of thinking, is this guy fighting, in the UFC at first if they didn't obviously know who you were, but they do now. But how did this sort of come around with the UFC? Because it's not that often we see, boxers like yourself get a big push from the likes of Dana.
Yeah, so I was fighting on a UFC Fight Pass, and I was headlining the shows, and I went to meet with the Fight Pass boys. I went to meet with Dana, just so we could see what was going on down there. And yeah, we sat down in an office, I had a meeting with Dana. We had a good day. He showed me around the PI and everything. And next thing you know, Howler Head Whiskey is my main sponsor, and Dana wants to come on board. 100%, and give me the backing of the UFC and stuff. And here we are. 7 fights in, just after winning a WBC title, and man, it's just crazy. The last 2 years of my life has just been the most craziest thing ever. It's just like nobody's getting what I'm getting. The training with Freddie Roach, like the push from UFC, like it's just, man, it's crazy.
And yeah, like you said, the last 2 years have been mad, and now you're like 7-0. But going back to sort of the move to LA, I believe I was sort of reading and just knowing from following your career. I know you think you went out there, to meet with your dad, and you sort of wanted to just train. I think it was during a time where the gyms weren't open anyway because of COVID. But is this sort of, and I know you met Freddie again as a teenager. So with this sort of move to LA you had 2 years ago, I believe, when you just turned 20, was it going there with the intentions of going permanently, or were you just going to train and you sort of maybe welcomed the idea? Like, how did it actually come around as a permanent move?
Yeah, so I had no intentions of going there permanently. I had no intentions of even turning pro. I was just going to go there and just train for a couple of weeks and come home because all the gyms were closed here. So I was like, right, the gyms are open in LA. I'm going to go there, train, and come back, try and get a bit of an advantage on the people that are here. So nobody here could train. So I was like, right, I'll go to LA and I'll come back there and I'll be fit, or I'll be after getting some good sparring. So next thing I went over, I was after meeting with Freddie. I sparred there my first day, done well. I was training with everybody. I started training with Tony Ferguson. I was sparring with top level pros and I was doing well. And then yeah, I just decided, I'll just turn pro. I'll try and make a bit of money here now. I'll see what I can do in the pro game. And here I am, 7 fights in, WBC belt, promoted by Tom Loeffler, an unbelievable promoter that had that's worked with Triple G, the Klitschko's, everybody, Freddie Roach has so many champions, Dana White, and it's crazy. I can't even, when I do sit back now and think about it, it's mad how it happened. Like if I just didn't decide to go to LA, and it never would have happened.
Mm. And going back to the wildcard thing, I know again when I mentioned at the start, like the whole sort of thing with Tony, you got a good relationship with him, but behind the scenes, is there any sort of fighters that or coaches and fighters in particular that have sort of helped you at wildcard in the last 2 years that have really sort of developed your game, or is it just the gym as a whole?
Yeah, it's everybody in the gym. We in the Wildcard, it's a lot of we have a good team there. Everybody helps each other. We all learn from each other. It's all kind of all us. Most of our sparring is in-house sparring. So like there's everybody there. Freddie is my main coach. He's my head coach. He does everything with me. But there's a few boys hanging around too. Like there's Marvin. He was part of Pacquiao's team. I work with him. Just I work with everybody. Even sparring, we're all helping each other. We all have different styles. So yeah, it's just the whole place really. It's just the whole team in general. We have a good team there.
Mm. Can you just talk to me a bit about before you went to LA? I know I saw some videos of you. I can't actually pinpoint what exactly it was you're working as. I think it was a trawlerman, but I know when you were sort of managing this full-time lifestyle of working and training, what were those sort of years like, and what were you actually working as, and how hard was it to sort of balance stuff on the side in terms of boxing as well?
Yeah, so when I was living back here in Cove, I was working on a fishing boat. I was working 7 days a week, hauling pots. So I was working 7 days a week on a fishing boat every single morning, and then I would just go train in the evening. And then if I had a fight on the weekends or whatever, I would have to just take a day. I would have to take a day off, go fight, and come back and then work the next day as well. So yeah, I was, but I still didn't know what I was going to do. I was just working to make some money, and I was just boxing just because that's all I knew what to do. Like I trained since I was 6 years old, so all I knew was go to the gym. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they were the days we trained here, and just fight whenever I had to fight. And yeah, it was hard to kind of once I started to get older. I was when I was younger, obviously it was handy because I didn't have to work on them. But when I started to get older and I had to work just to. So when I was working on the fishing boat, I was trying to buy a car because I just turned 17. So I was like, right, I need a car now. So I was working. That's why I had to work so much too, because I had to afford a car. So I think I bought my first ever car was a Renault Clio, a small little Clio. I bought it for €600, and the insurance at the time I was 17. I couldn't get any insurance. Nobody would insure me. So I think I had to pay 7 grand for insurance on a Clio, that I bought for €600. So I think my insurance, if I can remember now, was like €640 a month. Um, so that's why I was working 7 days a week just to afford the insurance for the car to drive myself to training.
Mm, mm,
It was hard, but I kept up. I stayed in the gym. I was just saying to another fellow a while ago. He was asking me about young people here in Ireland, young up and coming fighters, and that's the main thing is just staying in the gym. And I think that worked out for me. A lot of people they stop going to the gym or they think, oh, I can't get there tonight, or I'm going out with the boys and stuff. But I just stuck with it my whole life, and it paid off.
mm. For sure. And obviously, speaking of the sort of money side of things, I know, like you said, you didn't really uh plan to turn pro, if that makes sense, when you went to LA. And I know a lot of people were thinking like, how can this young guy be out living here in LA, one of the most expensive parts of the world? I know you're working a lot back home, but was it a sort of gamble? Because obviously at this sort of, the early stages of boxing career, I know you're training with all the big dogs, but the money certainly maybe isn't as big as you want it to be early on. So when you went to LA full time, was it sort of like, this could be an expensive thing if it doesn't work out, or in your mind was it like it has to work out because I really not got any other choice?
Yeah, well, when I first went there, I never had intentions of staying there, so I wasn't too worried about money, or I was just going to come back and just go back to work anyway. That was my plans. I told the boys I was working for, I said, right, I'll be back there in a few weeks, so I still had a job to come back to.
Hmm.
So I never planned on staying there for as long as I did, and I had family over there, which helped me. I was living with family for a while, but then when I turned pro, now I obviously have my own apartment and stuff over there, so but it is an expensive place. It's definitely hard for young people to just go and just move there. That's why I understand why a lot of people are like, how can you just move there? But yeah, I had family there, which was a big help for me.
Mm. And obviously, Ireland's had some great fighters over the last, decades, and going back to even like 100 years. And I was at UFC 285 for John Jones' fight. I know you were there also, and I sort of saw again Conor made a surprise appearance, and I saw you two had a brief sort of chat. Is that the first time you saw him? And obviously, speaking of fighters, I know he's MMA wise, but he's undoubtedly one of the most, if not the most popular from Ireland in the last sort of decade or so. So I'm guessing maybe, I don't know if that was the first time you met, but if it was, what was the sort of stuff that you said to you?
Yeah, so that was the first time I ever met Conor. You know, I think I seen him once before, just I think it was at a longitude or something here. He was there. I just seen him once, but yeah, that was the first time I actually met him. And the crazy part about it was I was sitting, I think, 2 rows behind him, and he walks in, and everybody there is calling him. You know, because McGregor's walked in, everybody's looking and calling him, and he kind of looked around. When he sat down, he looked around, and then he looked at me, and he was like, "Oh, all right," and he gave me a fist bump. And there was all these boys sitting next to me, and they were like, "Oh, do you know him? Do you know him?" I'm like, what? And then I walked around the front because I was just gonna get a photo with him, and yeah, he just came up to me and he was like, I was expecting, you know, to have to say like, "Oh, I'm Callum Walsh, I'm a boxer," but he just looked at me and he said, "Oh, Callum, like, I'm watching your boxing, you know, up the Irish," and you know, he knew exactly who I was, he knew exactly what I was doing, and it was crazy, you know, the fact that I was looking at Conor McGregor and he knew who I was.
Mm.
It was, yeah, it was unbelievable. The more I think about it now, it was actually the first time I ever met Conor McGregor. He knew who I was. Like, oh, it was fucked.
Mm. And given, obviously you're being pushed by the UFC a lot and you're on Fight Pass and stuff, I know probably a question you got a lot and going through the TikToks that you do, just the funny ones that gone viral and stuff is people were thinking, well, are you ever going to cross over to MMA? It's an obvious question, right? But I don't know if it's something that you've ever thought about or maybe your only focus at the minute is boxing.
But growing up, you know, I was a big UFC fan. I never really watched boxing. I just boxed because I was good at it. You know, it was something I always did. But definitely, you know, I feel like I'm such a big UFC fan. There's no way I can go through my whole career without getting in the cage. So I feel like I'm cross training at the moment. Like even when I'm not in camp, I do a bit of training with Tony. You know, I've sparred MMA. I do a bit of grappling, you know, a bit of stuff with him. So I feel like my main focus right now is boxing. You know, I'll just win as much. In an ideal world, now I would just win as much as I can in boxing, win as many belts and stuff as I can, become one of the biggest names in boxing, and then go to UFC and fight somebody. You know, a lot of the UFC fighters and MMA fighters are going to boxing. There's not a lot of boxers now want to get in the cage. So I feel like if I'd probably be one of the only ones that could go in there and maybe be successful, you know, in the cage too.
Mm. And speaking of belts, I know you made sort of joke that you can't take the first belt you've got off recently, the WBC one. But speaking of the actual world title, is that something you set? I know a lot of fighters sort of like to go fight by fight. Some of them have long-term goals. Do you sort of put that in the back of your mind as I want to get my first world title by then, or do you just think each fight, you're only as good as your last fight? So do you take it fight by fight, or do you look at a sort of year-long approach?
Yeah, I don't even, you know, I don't even think about fights, to be honest. The boys just they offer them to me, and they don't even offer them to me. They just tell me, you know, that's how it works. You know, my job is a fight. I'm paid to fight. So if they said to me, "Look, you're fighting for a world title here next week," I'd be out there and I'd fight for it. You know, so that's the kind of fella I am too. I'm not too worried about who I fight. You know, I'm confident in my ability. I'm 22 years old. I'm young. I'm strong, and I'm ready to go. So whenever they want me to fight for a world title, I'll fight for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It was great to speak to you after following your career for the past couple of years. So I look forward to probably speaking with you again and keep up all the great stuff, mate. It's nice to speak to you.
Absolutely, boss. Thanks very much.